Hi everyone, I'm Karen Finch and I'm the CEO of Legally Yours, and I'm actually filming this video on behalf of the Silicon Beach community today, and I'm actually with the absolutely brilliant Colin Kinner, who is the founder and CEO of Startup on Ramp. And in this interview we're going to talk a little bit about exactly what is Startup on Ramp and also about an event that they're running with the community next week. So thank you so much for joining me, Colin.
That's all right, it's a pleasure.
Yay. Okay, so what is exactly Startup on Ramp?
So we're a crash course on how to start a startup and not screw it up. There's
So needed.
yeah.
So
Look
needed.
at
Love it.
the more serious answer is we're a training and mentoring program for early stage startup founders. We've been running for about 3 years, and having been involved in the startup scene for about 20 years myself, I reckon I've seen every way there is possible to fail in a startup.
Yep.
I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of them too.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yep.
So it occurred to me that it would be really helpful if there was a program for early stage startup founders that showed them some of the basic things that they're probably going to need to know about to improve their chances of being successful.
Okay.
And so what we do is we basically show some of the shared traits and behaviors of successful entrepreneurs.
Yep.
And we say, here are the things that tend to be helpful. You can do
Yep.
those. And then we talk about things that lead to failure. What are all the pitfalls that people are likely to encounter? Sometimes they may not even know it's a mistake until after they've made it. And we say, well, here are all the things that are probably going to cause your startup to fail. And people are pretty smart and they'll avoid doing those things.
Absolutely love it, because it's such a valuable resource to have. And we were discussing before a little bit about how there's sort of this mentality of, you have a great idea, let's start it up and wing it. But often then, even though the idea is a really fantastic idea, often startups fail because they haven't got all the support, all the knowledge, or the education around them to support them. And so I guess that's what Startup on Ramp really aims to do, is to be able to take all that away and allow the idea to happen. So how do you actually assist them in relation to that? Is it a program, or what do you actually do? Do you take them?
Yeah, we've got a couple of different programs. We partner with startup hubs around the country to deliver our pre-accelerator program, which is a 12-week part-time series of workshops and mentoring sessions. Due to COVID, that's gone a little bit onto the remote delivery footing,
Awesome.
which has actually worked pretty well.
Yes.
But more recently, we've launched a completely online course called our Founders Course. And it's basically taking the best bits of the pre-accelerator program and turning them into a learn at your own pace online course. So we're finding that's going over really well. Obviously, at the moment, everything has to be online.
Yes.
And it's 30 modules of content. It's about 8 hours worth of video content, an online discussion forum, and we feature deep dives with about 20 experienced entrepreneurs, some investors, some subject matter experts who can unpack all of the things that people need to know about.
Absolutely love it. So some of those success stories, mention a couple of few success stories that have come through Start on Ramp.
Yeah, look, I've got a couple of favorites. One that I'm still very closely involved with is a company called SurePact. It's started by a lady called Megan Avard. She was actually one of our first alumni from Startup on Ramp. Megan comes from a contract management background, and the problem she decided to solve was that a lot of large infrastructure projects end up going 20 or 30% over budget.
Yes.
And if you're building a house, 20% over budget's pretty bad. But if you're building $1 billion freeway, 20% over budget's pretty serious.
Yes.
So she's built a software tool that basically simplifies the project management process so that people can reduce budget overruns and manage risk in large projects. So they're growing like crazy. So they
are. Oh my God. And particularly now, because there's lots happening in relation to infrastructure. So yeah, fantastic.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Yeah. And any others that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, look, we actually focus philosophically, we focus on building the entrepreneur rather than incubating their idea. So one of the things that we really like to see is when people come and do the Startup on Ramp program, and then they stop working on their idea and move on to something else. Because usually it means that they've realized quickly and cheaply that their idea wasn't going to work.
Okay.
Right. So we've had a number of successes. So one really good one is Shreyas Nivas, who's one of the founders of a synthetic voice company called Replica Studios.
Yeah.
And Shreyas went through Startup on Ramp several years ago, and he was working on a totally different idea, and he realized it wasn't going to work, which is, I call that a massive success, because he said, right, finish that. I'm going to move on to my next idea. and he's used some of the learnings that he picked up in Startup on Ramp to then work on his next one. And in fact, his first investor we introduced to him through the program.
Absolutely love it. There's some amazing stories in there. Thank you for sharing those. And you're actually running an event with the Silicon Beach community. So that's happening on Tuesday, the 4th of August at 12:30 p.m. Tell me what people can expect from that event, virtual event.
So the topic of the event, or the title of the event, is Startups Minus the Big S.
Yes.
And so
great title.
what we're trying to do is, I guess, unpack some of the myths in the startup scene. So BS comes in many forms. Sometimes it's just bad advice.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of that going around. You know, people get put off doing startups because they hear all sorts of urban myths that are actually just wrong.
Yes.
And people who start startups often find that they do stuff that really isn't helpful to them because they're given really bad advice. So we're going to unpack some of that. I'll not preempt too much of what we're going to cover, other than to say it's useful for anyone who's in the first couple of years of a startup or exploring an idea for a startup. And the aim is to kind of unpack some of those BS statements that people might hear.
Oh, absolutely love it. And we'll put the links to the event. And also for people, if they want to find out more about Startup on Ramp, they should just head to startuponramp.com. Is that right?
Yeah, and I know Silicon Beach is also going to be circulating some information to its member base. So I think I'm a big fan of what Silicon Beach has been doing.
Absolutely.
Having been involved in running Silicon Beach in Brisbane a while back, I think it's an awesome group.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this video. Thank you for doing what you do, because I think it's so incredibly important. And, you know, it's really interesting because we're finding a lot of startups are happening right now. I think people have, you know, COVID's giving you an opportunity to be quite creative and innovative and actually take a breath and think about things. But Startup on Ramp, let's do it right. So if you're a startup out there and you're thinking about an idea that you have, it's wonderful to be actually doing it in the right way and taking the time to make sure it's set up properly in those things. So thank you, Colin, and thank you so much for watching. And I'll certainly be there on Tuesday, and we hope to see you all there too. Thank you.
Cheers, Karen.